Welcome, everyone, to Sports Business Networks. And today we have an interesting guest in Matt Doherty, because usually we have our speaker series where we bring on CEOs and company executives. And we also have our Coaches Corner where we bring in coaches. Matt fits both of those roles, both as an executive and as a former coach. So welcome to the show, Matt Doherty.
Thank you very much, David. Excited to be on.
Well, let's dig in here, and we want to give all our guests an overview. You know, your background. You grew up on Long Island. We grew up in the same town. I went to elementary school with your brother. Always looked up to you as a basketball player and a leader. What was it like growing up on Long Island in a big Irish Catholic family like you had?
It was great. I was blessed to grow up in East Meadow, go to St. Raphael's, be surrounded by first generation Long Islanders. I mean, most of our parents grew up in Brooklyn and the Bronx, and instilled in us, I think, a work ethic, a respect for the elders, a sense of family, a sense of community that was very important to our development. And I think that I wouldn't have traded it for the world.
I agree with you on that one. It was a great place to grow up, great town to grow up. Now, in your early high school career, you were the first ninth grader, and you had an unbelievable coach in high school, and Bob McKillop. Bob went on to be, a longtime coach at Davidson. You were the first ninth grader that he ever pulled up to the varsity. What was that like?
Well, I had dreams and goals since I was young, and I wanted to play college basketball. I wanted to play at Holy Trinity. I wanted to win a state championship. I wanted to be an All-American. I wanted to play in college. Wanted to play in the NBA. I didn't make the NBA, but one of my goals was to be a play on the varsity as a freshman, and Bob McKillop was such a important figure in my life because what he represented, I wanted to encompass, and that was being a basketball player, being a competitor, being a hard worker, being intense. And my sisters were at Holy Trinity High School, so I'd go to the games when I was in grammar school, and saw the excitement and the energy of those games in the arena, the gym, and I wanted to be a part of it. And so, ever since I was probably in 5th or 6th grade, like, I wanted to be the best basketball player that I possibly could be.
Well, you obviously went on and did that. Now, what a lot of people don't realize is that you played in some intense games, obviously, both in high school and in college, but right around the block from both of our houses was a place called Prospect Park. And Prospect Park was known to bring in some of the best basketball players from Long Island just to have pickup games. What was it like, playing at Prospect Park, your home court, in essence?
I get goosebumps talking about it, David. The ethos of Prospect Park. I wrote a book called Rebound from Pain to Passion, and I talk a lot about the park. That had as much to do with my upbringing as any place, because it was all about meritocracy. It was all about, if you won, you got to stay on the court. If you lost, you sat. And at the end of the day, you knew the score. You knew if you won or lost. And then there were different courts, like court number 1 was the court. That was where the best players played. And there was court like 2. And if you weren't that good, you played on court 2. Well, I always wanted to play on court 1, even in 6th grade. And I'm playing on the court with college players, ABA players. And I always felt if I could play with better players, then when I play with my own age group, I would have a huge advantage. So I always try to play up in the park. I was in 6th grade, I was playing with 8th graders. I was in 8th grade, I was playing with guys in high school. So then when it got to the league play, and I'm an 8th grader playing against 8th graders, that would be easy for me. And so that's what I always try to do, is challenge myself against better competition. And the park was the park, man. And the thing I love about it is you were taught how to play by older guys. And I think that's something that's missing in youth sports now, is everything's organized by adults, where when you have it peer to peer, or when you're playing with older people and it happens organically. Now, if someone says something to you, it really means something, and you can't discount it. You can't hide from it. So if someone on the court says, "Hey, Matt, you need to take better shots, or you need to play harder, or you need to set better screens," you're more inclined to do it and own it than if some adult said it to you, because you could discount that. You could blow that off. But in the park, you were held accountable, because if you didn't win, you sat.
You know, what's interesting is what you're saying is very similar. Pat LaFontaine, NHL Hall of Famer, Team USA, Olympian, unbelievable individual and great player. And that's one of the things that he talks about. He said there's less, kids going out on the pond and just playing hockey for hours amongst themselves and being creative and learning new skill sets because they're willing to try it, because everything is so coordinated right now. It's interesting. We do a Sunday practice where we barely blow a whistle. We let the kids play and we just let them go. There's no out of bounds. This is lacrosse. There's no out of bounds. It's indoors, and we just let them go. And I think there's something to be said, just as you were saying, that's where you learn and grow. And the other thing that you pointed out is playing up. We see it today, and I don't know, if you're seeing it in other sports, but what's very interesting is parents who are getting their kids to play down, not up. Parents who are holding their kids back a year or repeating a year in 8th, 9th, or 10th grade so that they can have an advantage by playing kids that are younger than them. Have you seen that in other sports?
Yeah, I've seen it in other sports, so that they could have an advantage and have a better chance of getting a scholarship and things like that. I just think that you need to seek out the best competition you can, so you can achieve, I use this word a lot now, self-actualization. Like, I always wanted to reach my potential, and you're not going to reach your potential if you're playing lesser competition. And so I wanted to reach my potential as a basketball player, and I want to reach my potential now as an executive coach and as a person, as a father. And how do you do that? Well, I studied under John Maxwell, and he talks about you learn at the end of your comfort zone. So you've got to get out of your comfort zone. And by doing that, you become comfortable you become comfortable with the uncomfortable. And then that's how you grow and you elevate your game, whether that be as an athlete, as a leader, as a father. It's the only way to grow.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I love it. And that's the thing, is constantly pushing yourself, and also and taking the losses that you have and learning from those losses. There's a great book that someone gave me a while ago. It says sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. And it's, you got to take those losses as something to learn from. What was your recruiting process like? You're coming out of Holy Trinity, you're an All-American in high school, you play in the McDonald's All-American game, and now you're being recruited. What was your recruiting process like, and how'd you end up at UNC?
Well, I was blessed to have played at Holy Trinity for Bob McKillop, and we had good teams and he had good players. So he had players that had played at places like Florida, Tennessee, Fairfield, a lot of different programs. So I was being recruited pretty early, and was able to kind of narrow down a list, at the end of my junior year, and kind of knew what fit me. I wanted to go to a place that was really good basketball, but also good academics. And I wanted to play in a league, and the ACC was the best league in the country at the time. And I still think it's probably the best league in the country, but the Big East wasn't formed yet. And so, I'd gone to some St. John's games and got a feel of that campus. And, I wanted to go to a place where there was more of a campus and it was a league. And so I looked at Notre Dame, Duke, Virginia, and North Carolina. And ultimately, I felt that North Carolina had the best chance of winning a national championship. And I also felt like I would fit in best there because of what Coach Smith valued. He valued the things that I could do well. And I knew what I was and what I wasn't. And I was a smart player that was very skilled, but I wasn't a good athlete. I wasn't going to wow people with my athleticism. I was going to get on the court because I knew how to play. I knew how to win. And I knew he would appreciate that.
Yeah, well, also playing for a legend like Dean Smith, I mean, that's an unbelievable, opportunity. I know freshman year you came into UNC. I think you had an injury, broken thumb or something like that early on, so that limited your playing time. But sophomore year, you're starting sophomore year, and you're playing along with guys like James Worthy and Sam Perkins, and then you got an incoming freshman, Michael Jordan.
Yep.
Boy, did you guys have a hell of a team.
Well, we knew, the year before I did break my thumb, but I played most of the season and I was the sixth man. So we had 3 starters from a Final Four team returning, and I was the sixth man. We had Jimmy Black was our point guard from Cardinal Hayes in the Bronx, Sam Perkins from Brooklyn, James Worthy, who's to me the best player in the country, and then Michael Jordan coming in. And then I stepped in a starting role. So we had been to the Final Four the year before and lost to Indiana with Isaiah Thomas and had a core of the team returning plus Michael Jordan. So we knew we were good. We were confident. And our goal was to win a national championship. And our goal every year at North Carolina is to win a national championship. So we went through the regular season pretty well. We only lost 2 games. And that was an ACC play. And yeah, we were just a very talented group, but very unselfish. And I think a typical Coach Smith team, we didn't care who scored. We just cared that we won.
Well, I think that was a big part of your game. You were always known as one of the best assist guys in the game. You led the team with assists in many years, and that's playing that role of knowing who your teammates are and getting the people the ball when you need to get them the ball.
Well, I think one of the biggest things in the book that I wrote, Rebound from Pain to Passion, as a leader, you've got to know yourself. And then the second thing you need to know is your team. And I think that I knew myself that I was, and Coach Smith was very clear in defining roles. And I work with business owners and CEOs, and a lot of them don't do the basic things like defining roles. Like Coach Smith would let you know, hey, Matthew, I don't want you shooting that shot. I want that ball to go into Sam and James. Okay. And if I didn't do that, I wouldn't play as much. It's very clear. And so I knew what my role was. I understood why and played to it. And I was appreciated for it. The recognition that he would give me was important. And I'm listening to a book right now about recognition and how that motivates, catch people doing something right. Coach Smith would always say, praise the actions you want repeated. And he would praise me for feeding the ball inside to James and Sam, even though I didn't get, it didn't really show up in the box score, but I played a lot. I played more minutes than anybody on the team. In the national championship game, I played 39 out of 40 minutes. The only other player to play as many minutes as I did was Patrick Ewing. And so Coach Smith trusted me and valued me, even though it wasn't the most glamorous role.
It's interesting. I had the opportunity to go to the UNC Basketball Hall of Fame, and there's some great stuff in there. Obviously, all the national championship trophies. But the one thing that stuck with me the most was a letter from Coach Smith to Michael Jordan as he's coming into his freshman year. And he says to him basically in that letter, Michael, I think you could be a really good player at North Carolina. But if you want to be a great player at North Carolina, here are the things you need to be working on over the summer as you prepare to enter your freshman year. And he gave him a list of 3 or 4 things. And then Michael Jordan comes in, hits the winning shot for the national championship, wins a national championship as a freshman. And there's a letter from Dean Smith that said, Michael, you had a very good first year at North Carolina, but if you really want to be one of the great players ever from North Carolina, here are the 6 or 7 things you need to work on over the summer. And I just love that.
That's self-actualization, man. You know, Michael wanted to be the best that he could be. And he just happened to have the talent that if he could be the best that he could be one of the best ever to play the game. Coach Smith recognized that. Michael liked to surround himself with people that would tell him the truth. So I talk about the 6 no's of leadership, KNOWS. And again, it's in my book, Rebound from Pain to Passion. And I make up an acronym. I call it STEVIT. I make up a story because that's how we remember things. I recruited a kid named Stevitt from Western Europe. And his name stood for it was an acronym, STEVIT. You got to know yourself. You got to know your team. You got to know your environment. You got to know your vision. You got to know your industry, and you got to know the truth. You got to mine for the truth. And I think all the great leaders want to know the truth. And Michael wanted to know the truth. And he would surround himself with people that would tell him the truth, like Coach Smith, as opposed to people patting you on the back. Oh man, you're the best, you're the best, you're the best. You're not going to grow that way. So how do you mine for the truth? Finding people that will give you honest feedback. That's the only way you can grow.
I agree. I love it. You know, one of the things too is, you know, obviously you playing alongside some of these great players, but Jordan just being the one that just stands out as, you know, the greatest player of all time. He had a competitive fire, and you got to see that competitive fire in The Last Dance, the documentary about him. What was it like, you know, practicing, not just playing with him, but practicing with him?
Everything was competitive, you know, but I was competitive too. You know, like it's how we grew up in the park. Like if you didn't win, you sat. So you fought for everything. So there were times in pickup games where we would argue over a foul. Like I remember a pickup game. We're playing in Carmichael. Point game. He goes up for a shot. I strip the ball from him. He calls a foul. I get pissed off. I say, I didn't foul you. He says, you fouled me. I said, I didn't foul you. We didn't finish the game because I wasn't going to give in to him.
Love it.
He respected that. Now, the thing about Michael, he not only had the competitiveness, but he had the talent. See, I had the competitiveness, but I didn't have his talent. So I could only go so far. That competitiveness, he took to the highest level. And that was the NBA. So practice was competitive. And Coach Smith was one of the most competitive people I've ever been around. So he stoked our competitive juices. Everything in practice was recorded. So in every drill, there was a winner and a loser. And at the end of practice, he'd go down the winners and losers, and the losers would have to win sprints, run sprints. So we were competitive. Shooting drills. You shot the ball in practice. They record the percentages. They went up on the board in the locker room, and you got plus points for winning those drills. Those plus points went to your account. And then if you wanted to get out of sprints at the end of practice, you could draw from your account to get out of sprints. There was a system. I look at all the successful businesses have two things in common: good culture and a good operating system. And if they don't have a good culture and a good operating system, it drags down the performance of the company. You can have an average product, an average service, but if you have excellent culture and an excellent operating system, you're going to be very successful. And that's what Coach Smith had. He had an excellent culture and an excellent operating system. And he had some of the best talent in the world. That's why we won.
Yeah, you know, what's interesting is we had Anson Dorrance, the women's soccer coach from UNC. I look at Anson Dorrance, I consider him to be one of the greatest coaches ever in any sport with 22 national championships. And he gives a lot of credit to Dean Smith in his early years with helping him literally look at his players. And the one thing that Dean Smith told him was measure everything.
Well, if you measure it, you can manage it. I mean, that's like what, Peter Drucker? I mean, you know, the data, Coach Smith, you know, people talk about data analytics now. Coach Smith was mining for data back then in the 60s, 70s, 80s. He was a math major at Kansas. So he understood numbers. He understood percentages. He was the one who came up with points per possession. You see that now in NBA box scores. You see that now in the NBA. Everyone's talking about points per possession, offensive rating, defensive rating. Coach Smith was doing that in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s.
So do you think Coach Smith was one of the influences on you to take the leap from becoming a player to going into coaching?
No question. I was working on Wall Street. I got cut by the NBA and went to work on Wall Street and thought I was going to make millions. But I realized that I wasn't motivated by money. I really want to make an impact on something, on people. And I knew the impact Coach Smith had on me and all his former players. And I thought, how cool was that? So then I got into coaching. And still to this day, my mission statement is to make a positive impact on the people I meet and the groups I work with. That has not changed since I got into coaching in 1989.
And you started, I believe you started out with coaching with Bob McKillop, right?
That's right, at Davidson College. Bob's still there 36 years later, 33 years later, 34 years later. It's amazing what he's done there. And I live 10 miles from Bob, so I see him on a regular basis and talk to him on a regular basis.
I'm sure that's a great relationship. So, you know, some of these mentors that you've had, Bob McKillop, Dean Smith, and then you go on to Kansas, where you spent 7 years under Roy. What was it like coaching with Roy?
The thing, you know, Roy Williams.
Those who don't know what I'm talking about Roy Williams.
Yeah, Roy Williams was kind of a mix between Bob McKillop and Dean Smith, because he had Dean Smith's blueprints on how to run a program, and he had Bob McKillop's fire and passion. And so I really gravitated towards that. I was very close to Coach Williams when I was an assistant. And, you know, I dreamt about working on his staff, and I was there for 7 years. And I really wanted to understand the inner workings of the Carolina program. You know, it's one thing going through it as a player, but I really wanted to learn the system, you know, the operating system. And I got to do that. I got to understand the plays, why they were drawn up the way they were, how you broke down practice, how you evaluated games, how you graded film. Yeah, so I got the behind the curtain view of the program from Coach Williams and was very blessed for that. And
then you go from Kansas and you become the head coach at Notre Dame. And yep. You're at Notre Dame for a whopping year because the UNC job opens up. And then you get to go home to your alma mater. Yeah. What was that like, coaching at your alma mater?
Well, first of all, coaching at Notre Dame was great for an Irish Catholic kid from Long Island, from East Meadow, went to St. Raphael's. It was really a dream come true. I could have been there forever. But then when North Carolina opened up and Roy Williams turned it down, Coach Smith and Michael Jordan called me and you know, asked me to come home. And I did. I didn't want the job to go outside a family member. And, you know, we started out great. We were #1 in the country. I was National Coach of the Year. And then 2 years later, I was forced to resign. And that was very hard, David. You know, very scarring emotionally, and felt betrayed and hurt. And but I, as a player, as a coach, what do you do when you lose a game? You an athlete, you coach now. What do? You watch the film and try to get better. So I lost my job. They questioned my leadership. I said, okay, I'm going to go on a leadership journey. So I went on a leadership journey, studied leadership at Darden, at Wharton, with a gentleman by the name of Dr. Jerry Bell, Fran Johnston. I tried to read as many books as I could. And as I was studying, it hit me like leadership is a learned behavior. It's the most important topic that's not formally taught. And you can know the subject matter, but if you don't know how to manage and lead people, it really doesn't matter what you know about the subject. And my emotional intelligence was very low. My EQ rather, was very low. And I remember sitting in a class at Wharton being taught by Fran Johnson, and she was talking about emotional intelligence. And this was in 2003. And I said to myself, if I would have taken this class before I was a head coach, I might still be the head coach of North Carolina. And so that's why I became so passionate about leadership. And that's why I wrote the book, Rebound from Pain to Passion, the pain of losing my job, because if I wasn't a good leader, to becoming passionate about leadership. And that's why I teach and coach. That's why I'm an executive coach, because I want to help people avoid the landmines I stepped on.
And so now that's what you're doing. You're an executive coach today, helping companies get the most out of their people. I mean, it's your coaching is exactly what you're doing. You're still coaching. Are you still involved in hoops in any way?
A little bit. A little bit. I don't do much with basketball. I do a weekly radio show in Charlotte on WFNZ, which is sports. I also do WBT, which is news. I did a couple of games last year on ESPN, but I don't do many of those games at all. My primary focus is the executive coaching and keynote talks. I try to do 2 corporate talks a month, and to teach leadership and teamwork and culture.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest focuses, leadership and culture?
Yes. Well, to me, leadership is culture. I mean, it's really synonymous. It's just some people don't know how to drive a culture intentionally. And it's probably the most important thing you do as a leader, but it's the soft skill that is not, people don't see a direct line to the bottom line. So they avoid it because they're busy putting out fires, and that becomes their culture, is putting out fires instead of being intentional with your culture. And the best companies in the world are intentional with their culture, whether it be, Zappos or Ritz-Carlton or North Carolina basketball, or you've got to be intentional with your culture. And ultimately that will drive profitability, but it takes time. And it's not, it's not a direct correlation. It's not like if I do A, then I will see B, the result right away. It takes time for that culture, that engine, to get going, to drive the results. And so that's why I think a lot of people avoid it, and also think a lot of people haven't grown up in an environment of athletics or the military, so they don't know the value of a good culture.
It's interesting. We have all different types of athletes on the platform with Sports Business Network, from coaches to current student athletes to alumni. And what's interesting to me is, you and I both had a similar background. We both started out on Wall Street as bond traders, and we both realized very quickly that this wasn't the end all be all for us. I think a lot of kids are scared because they jump into jobs that they're truly not passionate about today, and they end up in these dead-end jobs, or they keep having to change careers. What advice would you give to our listeners out there on finding your passion?
Well, I think that's just it. I used to use, there was a book that was called What Color's Your Parachute? And I think it's still out, and it talks about the average person would change careers 8 times. Okay. Careers, not businesses, not in, careers. And I've done that. I think I'm probably on number 10. And it's okay. You take your first job, you think you would like an industry. You don't know until you try it. That's why I think college is so out of whack. They teach you, you got to major in something. Well, you major in business, you might not like business. My daughter liked art history. She's working for Ralph Lauren now in New York City. My son was sports management major. He's working for a construction company in Charlotte. It's not what you study. It's what you like. College should teach you how to think, teach you how to learn. You should study what you like and try to go into a field that you like. However, not everyone's going to like their job. Like my dad was a truck driver. He owned a Pepsi route, but he loved his family, and that was the means to the end, So, you've got to find something in your job that can fit you, and that's why I go back to the Stevitt model. Know yourself. What do you like? That's that book, What Color Is Your Parachute? Do you like to work inside or outside? Would you like to work in a cubicle on a computer screen all day? Or would you rather work with people outside? And then be honest with yourself and don't let anybody else decide or determine what is best for you. You've got to decide, because at the end of the day, when you're my age, our age, you look back, you don't want to look back and say, oh, I did that because my father pushed me in that direction, or it was a family business, or, listen, sometimes you don't get to choose. I get it. But if you have the freedom to choose, and that's the first goal. The first goal is to get an education and save your money. If you can say, and limit your overhead. Okay. So you have an education, you save money, and you have no overhead. Now you can make choices. I could leave Wall Street in 1989 because I had no debt. I wasn't married, didn't have any children, didn't have any overhead. I could tap my boss on the shoulder. I said, I'm out. I quit my job. I said, I'm leaving. He said, what time you coming back? I said, no, I'm out. Quit my job, moved to Charlotte. Thought I was going to get in the real estate business. Got into coaching. 11 years later, I was the head coach at Notre Dame. Imagine if I felt locked in and I stayed on Wall Street. I would have passed up the opportunity to be the head basketball coach at Notre Dame. Everybody on Wall Street would have changed, would dream about, and I said this, I was at my desk dreaming about being a basketball coach. And then when I was a basketball coach, I wasn't looking at my window dreaming about working on Wall Street.
Right, of course.
So what are your dreams? Now chase them. But to do that, you got to limit your overhead. Don't have debt. And then you have freedom of choice. Sure.
Let me ask you this. I mean, this is great. You've been on here. I know you're busy. We kept you going. I want to finish up. We always finish up with asking our guests, what's the best piece of advice you ever got and who gave it to you?
My dad gave me some good advice. He said, when you move to a new town, get to know the chief of police, a good lawyer, and a good accountant.
That's some good advice.
That's good old Brooklyn advice. I'd like to think that, my mom gave me, advice about debt. If you can't afford to pay off that bill, that charge, don't buy it. If you don't have the money in the bank to pay it off, then don't buy it. So I think debt has really put a lot of people in this country in a bad spot. The only good debt, in my opinion, is debt that can be leveraged, like, buying a house. That's probably a wise move, but depending on the market. Is it a good investment? Will that make money? Will that drive value? But if you can't afford it, if you don't have the money in the bank, don't buy it. And that comes down to discipline.
Well, two great pieces of advice, both from mom and dad. Got to love that. Well, Matt, listen, thanks so much for being on the show. We love having you. Go Tar Heels. We know you're a fan down there, always rooting for the Tar Heels. And my daughter is finishing up her final year there with the women's lacrosse team. So we're always rooting for the Tar Heels.
There you go. Thank you, David.
We appreciate it, Matt. Listen, have a great holiday, and we'll be in touch. And we appreciate everything that you've done here.
Thank you very much. Let me know when it launches.
Sounds great.
All right.